Okay, but I don't see anyone here. Okay. Hi, hello everyone. Am I audible? Okay, but I don't see anyone here. Okay. Okay. Can you hear me? Can you see me? People who are live now, could you just send a hi or something so that I'll get an idea that okay you're able to hear what I'm saying. Okay. Can you hear me? Can you see me? People who are live now, could you just send a hi or something so that I'll get an idea that okay you're able to hear what I'm saying. Okay. Can you hear me? Can you see me? People who are live now, could you just send a hi or something so that I'll get an idea that okay you're able to hear what I'm saying. Okay. Can you hear me? Can you see me? People who are live now, could you just send a hi or something so that I'll get an idea that okay you're able to hear what I'm saying. Okay. Can you hear me? Can you see me? People who are live now, could you just send a hi or something so that I'll get an idea. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't get it. Yes. Okay, I YouTube audio is mute now. Is it fine now? Okay. So anyway, so these virtual things are a little tricky as of now. Um I hope those who are watching live, I'm audible to you. Also, I'm visible. What I'll do, today's live session was primarily meant for the question paper discussion, a sample paper or last year's paper. I'll just go through it to give you an idea how, what sort of a question paper you should expect. I'll share the screen and I'll just go through the questions very quickly. Okay, so here it is. That's a sample question paper. Is my screen visible to all of you? Can you just send a hi so that I'll get an idea that you can hear me actually? Is the question paper visible on the screen? Can you guys see this? it's a sample paper again. I don't know what is how it's going to be. Um, it's a sample paper. This this is you will have primarily two sections. No, in fact, three sections. The first section will have short answer type questions, which would be each. So maybe in case of considering, you will have six questions, and out of that probably you have to answer five, or I don't really remember how exactly it will be, but then if it will be depending on the division of the marks, you have to decide how you're going to answer. Primarily, the section 1 would deal with the short answer types. Section 2 will be slightly longer, and section 3 would be the essay type answers. And in linguistics, essay type answers means you have to do some kind of data analysis, or some definition centric questions will be given and you have to explain it, or you have to describe that using data from your first language, or your mother language. Okay, so let's say let's look at the first question here. What is grammar, and what are the differences between descriptive and prescriptive grammar? This is one of the very common questions that we generally ask in our linguistics classes. So in the way, if you check the initial videos, very at the very beginning of the course, I did clearly talk about how the descriptive and prescriptive grammars are different. Generally, during the school, the way we have been taught, it's mostly prescriptive. You are given with a set of rules, and you have to follow that. And anything that doesn't fall in those set of rules would be considered as ungrammatical constructions or ungrammatical sentences. So that's how we understood English. Like that's how we learned English in a formal school environment, and that's the prescriptive grammar. But when we talk about the descriptive grammar, then it's going to be mainly taking into account or taking into consideration the languages that you speak, and then the variations that are available in your language. And on the basis of that, you have to frame a set of rules which will be more inclusive, and it will take care of different varieties of the same language. So that would be mainly the descriptive rules or the descriptive grammar. As I mentioned, linguistics, or I have already mentioned, I think in one of the videos, the linguists, they prefer more the descriptive grammar because we do believe in the as many variations as possible should be taken care of when you are trying to frame rules, or when you are trying to propose certain rules and regulations in a particular language. So that's primarily the difference between descriptive and the prescriptive grammar. And then the second question could be, what is an ideal vocabulary? Do you think your language has an ideal vocabulary or not? Generally, if you look at the definition or the standard understanding or the traditional understanding, an ideal vocabulary is something when you have a word for everything that you encounter in your surrounding, and every word that you have would have a representation or would have a coordination. So if something similar is happening in your language, like whatever you say, there is a word for it, and whatever word you have, there would be an interpretation to it. Then only it will be considered as an ideal vocabulary. So you have to think about it and then find out whether your language would have, or your language does have the ideal vocabulary or not. You have to think about it and you have to answer. I'm not going to tell you the answer now, but just think about it. And what is the head of the kernel phrase, and then what are the underlined phrases? Again, go back and then do check the videos, and then you have to find out how it has been explained, and then you should be able to get an idea. And the example is already given. John knows that, Mary believes that, Peter feels that, Mr. Brown is a good policeman. Just to give you a clue, this is we call it embedding. This is an embedded structure. So multiple phrases have been embedded one after another. So this is a longer sentence, and the nucleus or the core phrase would be Mr. Brown is a good policeman, and the rest of the things.
Ma'am,
yeah.
I have typed something on the chat.
Maybe you should send it in my WhatsApp. That will be better. So when we are thinking about the kernel phrase and then the underline phrase, then it will be easier for you to understand what would be the nucleus, or what would be the main part of the sentence, and then the rest of the things have been stacked one after another. So this is called embedding, right? So you have to find it out, and then you have to uh, do a tree diagram. In case we have discussed it, if it hasn't been discussed, then that's a different thing altogether. In case you uh, and for sure the questions you are going to get would be a part of the videos that we have discussed, or the part of the video that we have had so far, and nothing beyond the discussions we have had in the video is going to be a part of the exam. This is just for your information. In such a construction, if it hasn't been discussed in the video, then it's not going to come. But this is just a sample question that you should understand, and similar sort of questions you may encounter in the exam. Okay, then you have this could be a construction like the word able is converted into a noun. So these are just logic centric questions. There are, in most of the languages that we speak, the nouns can be derived from different kinds of parts of speech. For example, from a verb you can get a noun, from an adjective you can get a noun, maybe sometimes from an adverb you can get a noun. So you have to think which, like, how many of these processes are involved in your language, and maybe I'll give you some data from some other language, or I'll ask you to find out the derivation using the data that you have in your language. So here the question is, the word able is converted into a noun, and it is ableness, which is considered to be an ill-formed word. So when I say ill-formed, it's not necessary that you will get this question. It's not necessary that you will get the previous question that I discussed, but similar sort of questions you should expect. So when I say ableness, it seems to be a little unusual, and we don't really have this kind of a word in English language. So then you have to explain maybe something if not exactly this one, some similar sort of questions you may encounter, and you have to tell us why this particular word seems to be ill-formed. You haven't really ever heard about it, so it's going to be little tricky for you. You have to figure out what could be the possible reasons for that, and what is the criteria that has been given. The criteria for well-formed words: right choice of morphemes, right form of chosen morpheme, and then the right order. If you recall, in one of the videos I must have talked about the morphological typology, and what do we do there? We do take care of three things. You have to choose the right morphemes. Then after that, the right form of the morpheme has to be formulated or formed, and then eventually everything should be kept in the right order. Then only you are going to get the right word. So in this case, able is fine, ness is fine, but then the combination of able and ness seems to be a little ill-formed, like in case of English as a language. Okay, so this could be or similar questions you may encounter. And then the fifth one is a data centric or the data driven question. You would get a lot of other language data maybe. In this case, this is a language called Navajo, which is spoken in southwestern. It's a Native American language spoken in the southwest part of the country, and we have already given you the data here. What does the first one mean? The horse kicked the mule, and the mule kicked the horse. The boy kissed the girl kissed the boy, and then the boy saw the horse. So looking into this, you have to apply the permutations and the combination. The logic has to be applied. And even if you do not, so the whole intention of linguistics is that you don't have to, you don't need to speak that language, or you may not need, you may not know that language at all, but at least you must understand the structure that it has. And the linguistic structure, you should be able to understand, you should figure it out by following the questions or by following the empirical data that has been given to you. So given the data set that you have in hand in this particular question, what you have to do, you have to find out what is the word for horse, what is the word for mule, what is the word for boy, girl, kicked, saw, right? So these are the words, and the whatever given data that you have in hand, you have to deal with that. So it's not, so that is why don't be surprised if you see questions like this. You should not think that, oh, I don't know this language, how I'm going to answer this. But we have given you enough data to infer the logic so that you can answer the questions. And then after you identify what are the Navajo counterparts of these words, it should have the basic word order, whether it is SOV or SVO or VOS, VSO, all the 6 types of word orders that we have discussed. You should be able to answer that. And how would you arrive in that conclusion in the basic word order? Because once you get to know what is Li, what is Zan, Zanis, what is Vitzal, so once you get to know, like once you identify which word is what, you will automatically get to know what should be the basic word order. So it should not be a problem. So don't be surprised if you see a question like this. Then again, I don't say that all the questions or all the all the questions that we have, you are familiar with it. I'm just discussing a sample question, and you should expect questions to come from only from what we have discussed so far. So discuss the phenomenon of reduplication in words. I think you remember when it is reduplication, it should be either complete reduplication or partial reduplication. There are something called the echo words. So all of these and reduplication is quite a productive phenomenon in most of the South Asian languages, be it Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, or Tibeto-Burman or Austroasiatic. In most of the languages, we do see a lot of reduplication. And those who understand Hindi or related languages, related in the sense regionally related, let's say Odia or Bangla, all these Indo-Aryan languages, they do have multiple instances of reduplication. We have all these words like jhar, khar, pani, vani. So these sort of examples are going to be a part of the reduplication. So, and there is a generalization based on it. So what is it? The question is based on the generalization. Cross-linguistically, most common meaning of the reduplication is the qualitative and quantitative augmentation of meaning of the base. So you have to find out what is the base and whether the entire base has been reduplicated or a part of it has been reduplicated. So that you have to find it out depending on the data that you have in hand. So this one, this section, we have the total marks 40. If you answer, I don't know, this was 6 questions. Probably I must have given you 8 questions or 5 questions. I don't remember. Just look at the total marks and then you answer accordingly depending on the word limit that has been given. So that is in section A. Then in section B or section 2, you have 3 questions you have to answer, and it is the total marks would be 30. So it's going to be 10 points each. You would have an option for sure, and this should be the word limit 300. And then what are the language universals? That there has been discussed enough about language universals, how certain phenomena which are available across languages. So we call them absolute universals. Then we have statistical universals. So if there is X, there is Y. That is going to be the implicational universal. So primarily, these 3 terms you need to remember. One is absolute. The second one is implicational, when you have the if and then combination, and then you have the statistical. So when I say statistical universals, that's primarily, it's going to be the phrases that you should have is like most of the languages have this feature, so then it will be statistical. If a language has X, then there is Y, that will be implicational. And all languages have this feature, that is going to be the universal, that is the absolute universal. So you must understand how the universals are different. And then the question is discuss various categories of universals with relevant examples. I have already given you an idea, and you can always refer to the videos and then the book that has been recommended to you. Okay, so that's something which is a very simple definition, definition and concept centric question. So it should not be a problem. Now look at this. There is a new language, question number 8. Syntactic typology deals with cross-linguistic generalizations in the choice and order of words and word forms. Look at the data set given below. Observe the choice of word forms in various languages and answer the questions. So the English sentence is I follow him, and then the German sentence is this. So in English, so this is this, and then the French counterpart is this. English is 3 boys, the Russian counterpart has been given there. So this is the data that you have in hand. And on the basis of the data that you have to answer the following questions. So what are these? Compare the position of the adjectives in languages like English and French. So now look at this. we have to find out the position of the adjective. So what is the adjective here? Dissatisfied with something, and the French counterpart is given here. What are you supposed to do? Find out what is the adjective, and do let us know whether in English and French, in both the languages, they are treated similarly or different, or there is a difference. So when you say dissatisfied with something, what is the position of the adjective? And when you say the same phrase, or the same phrase in French, what is the position of dissatisfied? Whether this is depending on the position of it, whether the word order is same or different. And if you think there has been certain differences in the positioning of the phrase, then you have to mention that. So whether you are going to put them in the same category, or you are going to make them separate or different, that you have to identify. Here the question has come for the adjective. You might get other kinds of data where you have to identify different kinds of parts of speeches. It may be postposition, it may be preposition. Let's say I'll ask you a question to compare the adpositions in English and Hindi. So when you say in English on the table, and in Hindi it becomes table ke upar. So when you say on the table, so then that's going to be the preposition. But when it goes to Hindi, then it's going to be table ke upar. So it's going to be the postposition. So what do you have to do? You have to figure out what is the position of it, and whether there are other kinds of differences that you are encountering. That is the first question. The second one, how is the numeral treated differently in English and Russian? So you have to find out when it is 3 boys, what is the treatment of the numeral? What is the numeral here? That is 3. And how it is treated in Russian? What is the numeral here? That is 3, and then which means 3. But if you look at the way boy sing is singular and then genitive, you have to identify how these two these two phrases are different in English and Russian. So what is the striking or the major difference that you see? In Russian, you have a singular, then there is a genitive marker, which indicates the plurality. But that doesn't really happen in English. In English, you just have a plural marker, that's it. But here you have a case marking. Even if you don't remember all the case marking and other stuff, which are a little tricky, you just, if you simply write, there is a marking, or there is a gen marking, I'm also going to consider that. No problem with that. I'll be okay. It's not necessary that you have to mention it's a case or something else. Just write, I see a different kind of a marking in Russian, which is different from English. Okay, then question number 9. Discuss some of the cross-linguistic generalization that linguists have proposed about the existence of body parts. Cite adequate examples for each of the generalizations. So again, go back to the lexical typology. It was discussed over there. So how the upper body parts are rudimentary and the lower body parts are derived. There would be a couple of generalizations like that. Just remember, and then do give us an example from your own language. You don't have to give us examples from English or from other languages. Just think about it, whether in your language do you have this kind of a derivation. Do you have something like the upper limb and then the lower limb? So in case of English, we have upper and lower. So that's compound word, and the lexical items are different. But do we really have something like this in our language? For upper limbs, we have different word like haath, and I'm talking about Hindi. And for the lower limbs, we have different words like pair, right? So lexically, they are different. They're not really derived from that. But in case of English, everything can be put together as limbs. And upper part of the body will have upper limbs, lower part of the body would be the lower limbs. So after that, they have hands and legs. That's a different thing. But they also have a more generic term for the limbs. So these kind of examples, and then you will get enough from Moravsik. You should also look for your own languages. Do you have some sort of derivation depending on the typology, or depending on the lexical items that you have, which denotes various body parts. Okay, and then you have the 10th question. From the given stems and affixes, what are the logically possible word structure have emerged in the world's languages? Discuss separatist and cumulative affixes in Turkish and English. So English and Turkish, these are two different kinds of languages. You need to look for separate. When you say separatist language, that means the morphemes are separate, or they are they're loosely connected. And when it is cumulative, everything has been put together. So when you have multiple morphemes in one word, that becomes a complex word. That would give you a cumulative suffix. And when you have multiple morphemes in a word, and each morpheme has a different meaning, that would be separatist. And when you have a word where everything has been fused, that would be that would be the cumulative one. So maybe I should give you an example. Hindi example I would give. When we say khana khaye hain, so in case of hain, you see there is a nasal a marker. So hain could either be plural, or it could be honorific. So that means it's all fused over there. You can't really separate and then a, so that you cannot do that. When everything has been put together, and that gives you a cumulative affixes. And when you have, let's say, educated, so educate and ed, so they can clearly be separated. So when you say ed has a separatist kind of a morpheme. And or maybe hey is a little difficult, maybe khayenge. So when you say khayenge, one is kha, that is the verb root. Then it will be ga, which is the future tense marker. And then a, that is the plural marker. And then that is the honorific marker. So in a simple phrase like khayenge, so many things have been accumulated. So that would be a cumulative affix, but you can't really segregate them. But if there are morphemes where everything can be separated, you're going to call it a separatist affix. So that you can explain giving data from these languages, and as far as the separatist and cumulative affixes are concerned. So that should be 10 points. So and how the marks are going to be distributed. If you write what is a stem, what is an affix, and then how stems are different from the affixes. And when you call it affix, then it definitely you have to bring in the prefix and suffix. And what is a prefix? The prefix is an affix which is used before the stem, and suffix is an affix which is used after the stem. So then it's going to be it's going to be considered like this would be considered as a 5 points question, because you are explaining each of the terms. You are talking about what is a stem, what is an affix, what are the categorization with examples. Make sure in whatever questions you have, you need to give the examples for that. Otherwise, it's going to be a little tricky for me to understand whether you understood the concepts well or not. And then the cumulative and then the separatist affix pattern, you can talk about giving examples from your language, as well as simply you can write, because you are not a person who speaks Turkish. But since it has been discussed in the video, just remember in Turkish, you have multiple morphemes fused. So one word will have multiple meanings there. Sorry, multiple references there. So that's the reason why we are going to call it a cumulative affix pattern. Okay, so that's about the 10th question. And then finally, the essay type ones, which would be 20 marks each. Here, I would expect you to write a little more. The word limit is 400. And what is the question? The question is, linguists argue that those specific languages differ from each other on the surface. If we look closer, we find human languages are surprisingly similar. What does the statement say about the abstract properties of natural language and universal principle? Just to give you a hint, in case you get a similar question, you should always talk about the innateness hypothesis. So how on the surface the lexical items are different, the morphemic structures are different, but at the theory underlying level, you have something called universal grammar. We call it UG, right? So the universal grammar and innateness hypothesis, Chomskyan proposal about human language, everything should come into discussion when you have a question like this. So it's going to be a long answer type question. You have to talk about what is innateness hypothesis, why, and how it has been why it has been claimed so. Primarily, you have to talk about the child language acquisition with very limited set of rules with very limited set of exposure to the language, how the child acquires language, how a child acquires language effortlessly, and how until the age of puberty, there's this belief, or not belief, there has been a claim that this, we call it critical period hypothesis, right? That has been, I'm sure it has been discussed in one of the videos, if I remember it correctly. Since this is a rerun course, I don't clearly remember which part of the course it has been discussed, but I think it's in the initial part where I have been talking about, like where I did talk about both the critical period hypothesis and the innateness hypothesis. So when you say innateness hypothesis, what does it talk about? It says that the language is universal and it is hardwired into your brain. So just by being a human child, you have, there is an abstract concept, language acquisition device. So you can actually acquire multiple languages without any formal training. You don't have to, when you spoke your first language, nobody actually taught you how to speak it. So you never had a formal training to speak your first language. So that's the reason why we call there is something called innate. And what is innate? That is hardwired into the human brain. So that is what you have to talk about when we have when we have a underlying structure that remains same. And that is what I want you to focus on when you encounter a question like this. What are the properties of natural language, like the abstract property of natural language, and how the universal principles are applied to it? You can always talk about that. Primarily the children, like child language acquisition. Okay, what is the second question? Let me see. Children, while acquiring their first language, need to be able to segment continuous speech into units and identify relationships among them. Okay, in such cases, what are the relationships which are crucial to the comprehension and production of sentences? Discuss in detail with relevant examples. So, yeah, very briefly, I'll just tell you what sort of an answer I would expect, but I don't think this kind of a very description centric question will come, but still, just to give you an idea. So when the child is acquiring the first language, it's difficult for the child to have a continuous speech. When I say continuous speech, that means I'm talking about full-fledged sentences with a subject and a predicate. So that kind of instruction comes very late. So what the child does, if you look at the one word stage and then the multiple words, then eventually the child gets the sentences, and the sentences have to be very simple. Gradually, when the child acquires more vocabulary, you get the longish kind of constructions. So when the child goes through all these stages, one has to find out what kind of relationships would be crucial to comprehend the production of sentences. So what do you think? What is crucial for here? One has to find out how it is important at phonological level, morphological level, and sentential level. So you must have right kind of morphemes, you must have right kind of words, and the words would be bound together and will give you the sentences. So maybe you should bring in examples from English or examples from your own language, but you need